I never used to think much about water when I was hiking. My fears were usually more about falling on rocks, running into snakes, or getting caught without enough daylight. But after living near the coast for a few years, the ocean crept into my mind in ways I never expected. The power of it, the unpredictability of it, the fact that a single wave could change everything. That thought stayed with me, even when I wasn't hiking near the shoreline. I had seen enough footage of tsunamis, enough stories about people who had been caught by surprise, and it rooted itself in me as one of my greatest fears. When I planned this hike, I knew it was going to take me along a stretch of coastal cliffs. The trail wasn't right on the waterline, but close enough to hear the waves smashing against the rocks far below. It was the kind of hike where the beauty felt unreal. The cliffs stretched for miles, the Pacific stretched farther than my eyes could follow, and the sound of the surf rose and fell in the background like the breath of something enormous. I wanted the peace of it, the escape of walking where the world felt raw and open, but a small part of me kept thinking about what would happen if the ocean suddenly rose up in the form of a wall of water. That thought might sound dramatic, but it's not something you shake when you've lived through the fear of it once before. Years ago, when I lived in a low-lying coastal area, I woke up to the sound of someone screaming about a wave. We hadn't even gotten warnings because the power had been cut as a precaution, so we were unaware of what was coming until we were suddenly running for our lives. I don't remember much beyond the pounding of my heart and the way my body shook afterward. Nothing ended up hitting our specific area that time, but the panic of that morning stayed with me. It embedded itself deep enough that now, even when I'm hiking far above the water, my body remembers the fear and reacts to it before I can tell myself it's irrational. I started the hike early in the morning. The air was cool, the kind of cool that has a sharp edge to it because the sun hasn't had time to warm the ground. The dirt of the trail crunched under my boots, and the salty smell of the ocean mixed with the faint sweetness of wildflowers that clung to the side of the cliffs. For the first hour or so, everything was calm. I passed a couple of other hikers early on, but once I got farther, the trail felt almost empty. I liked it that way. Silence, with only the crash of waves below and the distant calls of seabirds circling high overhead. But even in those calm stretches, my mind wandered to darker places. Every time I looked out at the endless horizon of water, I thought about how small I really was. If something massive came out of that ocean, there'd be nothing I could do. No warning, no way to outrun it. Just me exposed on the cliffs. I tried to shake it off, focusing instead on the rhythm of my steps, the tightness in my calves as the trail started climbing higher, the burn in my lungs as I pushed uphill. Hours passed like that. The sun rose higher, and the cool air gave way to a steady warmth. The dirt turned to dry dust in places, coating my boots and leaving faint clouds when I stepped too hard. I drank water in slow sips, careful not to waste it, because I knew once I turned around for the return trip it would be a long way back. Everything felt normal, but that didn't stop my mind from feeding me images. Sometimes I'd catch myself glancing over my shoulder toward the ocean, as if I expected to see a surge of water rolling toward me. It wasn't just the tsunami fear either. Something about the isolation, the endless sound of the waves below, made me uneasy. The ocean doesn't stop. Even when the wind is calm, the water is always moving, always shifting, always reaching for the shore. That steady, relentless noise worked its way under my skin until I felt like it was inside me, like my body was vibrating with it. The trail narrowed in one stretch, hugging the side of the cliff so closely that I had to press myself against the rock to let another hiker pass. Looking down, I saw the waves smashing directly against the base of the cliff, spraying white foam so high that it almost touched the trail. My stomach clenched hard, and I gripped the rock with one hand until I was safely past. I told myself to breathe, to stay steady, but my legs felt heavy and unsteady for a while after. By the time I reached the halfway point, the sky had shifted. Thin clouds spread across it, soft at first, then thicker. The light dimmed, and the blue of the ocean took on a darker, more steel-like color. I sat on a rock to eat a small snack, but I couldn't relax. My eyes kept going back to the horizon. I thought I saw something, a strange swell in the distance, but when I blinked it was gone. Probably just the way the light shifted, or maybe just my mind playing tricks. Still, My chest tightened, and I felt that same old pulse of fear pushing its way back to the surface. The trail back felt longer than the trail out. My body was more tired, but more than that, my head was working against me. Every gust of wind that pushed against my back felt like it carried some kind of warning. Every louder crash of water against the rocks below made me flinch. I picked up my pace, not running but moving quickly enough that my legs ached. I wanted to be away from the water, away from the cliffs. I wanted to be back where I could breathe without thinking about the ocean creeping up behind me. Halfway back, I noticed how high the tide had gotten. When I'd first passed this stretch earlier, the rocks at the base of the cliff had been exposed. Now the water was slamming directly against them, throwing spray halfway up toward me. I hadn't realized how much time had passed, how quickly the tide could change. It made me realize how small the margin really was between safety and danger out here. One wrong calculation, one missed sign, and the ocean could cut you off without warning. The trail curved again, and for a long stretch I had no view of the horizon. That was worse somehow. Not being able to see what might be coming filled my head with possibilities. My chest tightened more with every step. My breath came faster. I felt like I was moving through some invisible pressure that was closing in on me. When the trail opened back up to the water, I froze. The horizon looked strange, darker, blurred in a way I hadn't seen before. My first thought was that maybe rain was coming, maybe a storm, but then my mind went straight to the fear. What if it wasn't just weather? What if it was the ocean building itself into something larger, something ready to rise up against the land? My whole body locked, my legs refusing to step forward, my throat tightening so much I could barely swallow. I forced myself to keep moving. My boots scraped against the dirt. My hands brushed against the sharp plants that lined the trail. I kept my eyes down as much as possible, focusing on the ground instead of the horizon. The noise of the waves roared in my ears, louder than before, though maybe that was just my own fear amplifying it. By the time I saw the parking area in the distance, I was shaking. My shoulders felt tight, my chest heavy, my mouth dry even though I had water left in my pack. Every step closer felt like a small victory, like I was pulling myself out of something that could have gone very wrong. When I finally reached my car, I leaned against it and just stood there for a long time, breathing hard, trying to slow the pounding in my chest. I looked out one last time at the water. The horizon looked calmer now, the strange blur gone, but I couldn't shake the thought of how easily it could have been different. One storm, one shift in the earth deep below, one unexpected surge, and I might not have had the chance to stand there catching my breath at all. I drove home with the windows down, the cool air rushing in to wash away the tightness in my chest. I knew I'd keep hiking. I knew I wouldn't let the fear stop me from being outside. But that day reminded me just how fragile the line is between calm and chaos. The ocean doesn't care who you are, doesn't care if you're careful, doesn't care if you've planned. If it decides to rise, it will, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. And that's what stayed with me most, the realization that my nightmare wasn't just in my head. It was real, it was possible, and all I could do was hope I'd never be in the wrong place at the wrong time when the water decided to come for the shore. I've lived in California most of my life, and if there's one thing I've always loved about it, it's the variety of trails. You can walk through forests thick with pines, climb dry, dusty ridges with views that stretch out forever, or hike along the coast with the ocean mist cooling your skin. But as much as I love hiking, there's always been one thought that lurks in the back of my mind whenever I go out alone. What happens if I get stuck out there, unable to make it back? I've read the news stories, seen the headlines, people going missing, found days later, sometimes alive but more often not. Dehydration, falls, heat stroke, even heart attacks. California has beauty, but it also has a way of reminding you how unforgiving it can be if something goes wrong. And one day, I came close to living out that nightmare myself. It started as a simple plan. A Saturday morning, late summer, sky hazy from distant fires but otherwise calm. I wanted to clear my head after a rough week, so I picked a trail I'd done a couple of times before. It wasn't long, about 10 miles round trip, but it had a mix of everything. open ridges, wooded sections, and a final climb that gave a view of the whole valley. I packed light: 2 bottles of water, some granola bars, a small first aid kit, and a jacket stuffed at the bottom of my pack in case the wind picked up. I wore my usual boots, well broken in, with socks I trusted. The parking lot at the trailhead was quiet when I arrived, just a couple of other cars scattered around. I took a deep breath before setting off, feeling that familiar calm I always get at the start of a hike, the kind that makes the stress of daily life fade away. The trail wound upward, the dirt still cool in the shadows, and I felt strong, steady, moving easily into a rhythm. The first hour was uneventful. Birds flitted through the brush, lizards darted across the path, and every so often a warm gust of wind carried the smell of dry grass and dust. I stopped to drink water, careful not to gulp too much too fast, and pushed onward. As the trail climbed higher, the sun grew harsher. The shade thinned out, and the heat pressed down on me, dry and heavy. My shirt clung to my back, and sweat gathered under the brim of my cap. I slowed my pace, careful not to burn out too quickly, but I wasn't worried. I had done this trail before. I knew what to expect. It was on one of the ridges, maybe 3 miles in, that it happened. The ground was uneven, the dirt loose with pebbles scattered across it. I stepped forward. My boot landed on what felt like solid ground, and then it shifted. The rock rolled under me, my ankle twisted, and before I could catch myself, I was down. My knees slammed into the dirt, my palms scraped raw against gravel, and pain exploded through my ankle. For a few seconds, I just lay there, stunned, the sky spinning above me. Then I tried to push myself up, only to feel sharp pain stab through my ankle. I hissed in air and dropped back down. My stomach turned cold despite the heat. I sat there for a while, trying to collect myself. I unstrapped my pack and pulled it off, then peeled off my sock to check the damage. My ankle was already swelling, a sickly bulge pushing up against the skin. Not broken, I told myself, but badly sprained. Walking on it would be nearly impossible. That was when the reality of the situation sank in. I was alone. There was no one else in sight, no voices on the trail, no sound except for the faint hum of insects and the distant rush of wind. The parking lot was miles away, the sun was climbing higher, and I was sitting in the dirt with an ankle that could barely hold weight. Panic started to build in me. I grabbed one of my bottles of water and forced myself to take a small sip, steadying my breath. Couldn't lose it, not yet. I needed to think. I tried to stand, slowly, using my trekking pole to brace myself. The moment I put weight on the ankle, pain flared white-hot, sharp enough to make me gasp. My leg trembled, and I collapsed back onto the ground. Walking normally was out of the question. I thought about crawling, about dragging myself along the trail, but I still had miles to go, over ridges and through rough terrain. The sun was unforgiving now, the heat bouncing off the dry earth, and I could feel my skin already burning under it. My water, though I had packed what felt like plenty, suddenly looked like nowhere near enough. I shifted into survival mode. I dug into my pack, pulling out the small first aid kit, and wrapped the ankle tight with the elastic bandage inside. It wasn't much, but it gave the joint a little stability. Then I looked around. Shade was scarce, just a few scattered bushes and the thin shadows of rocks. I knew if I sat there too long, the heat could take me down faster than the injury. So I forced myself to move. Not walking, not really. I hobbled, leaning heavily on my pole, dragging my bad leg forward in awkward, uneven steps. Each movement was agony, my body slick with sweat, my mouth growing dry no matter how carefully I sipped at my water. The trail stretched on endlessly, each bend revealing only more sun-baked ground. Hours passed like that. The sun scorched the back of my neck, my arms, my legs. My lips cracked, my ankle throbbed with every jolt, every uneven step. I rationed my water, but it drained faster than I wanted. The thought of running out gnawed at me, sharp and relentless. At one point, I stumbled and fell to my knees. Dust puffed up around me, clinging to my sweaty skin. I stayed there, head bowed, chest heaving, feeling the edges of panic creep back in. My heart pounded hard, and for the first time, The thought of not making it back crossed my mind fully. The trail was too long, the sun too harsh, my body too weak, but I forced myself up again. I thought about the stories I had read, the hikers found days later, curled under bushes, packs beside them, lives ended by a single mistake or a stroke of bad luck. I didn't want to be one of them. I refused. By late afternoon, my water was almost gone. My legs shook with every step, my vision blurring around the edges. The air shimmered with heat, and every sound, the crunch of gravel, the rasp of my own breath, felt distant, unreal. My ankle was swollen so badly now that every movement felt like fire. And then, finally, I saw it. The faint glint of a car through the brush, the edge of the parking lot just beyond the last ridge. Relief crashed over me so hard I almost cried. The last stretch was torture, each step dragging me closer while my body screamed to stop. But I couldn't. I kept moving until my boots hit the asphalt, until I collapsed against the side of my car, chest heaving, skin burning, vision swimming. I sat there for a long time, slumped in the shade of my car, too drained to do anything but breathe. My ankle throbbed, my body shook with exhaustion, but I was safe. I had made it back. That day taught me more than I ever wanted to know about how thin the line is between a good hike and a nightmare. All it took was one wrong step, one rolled ankle, and I was inches away from becoming another story on the news. Now, whenever I think back to that day, I still feel the heat pressing down on me, still hear the rasp of my dry breath, still see the endless trail stretching out under the sun. It hasn't stopped me from hiking, but it changed me. I take more water than I think I need. I carry a whistle, an emergency beacon, stronger first aid supplies. I tell someone exactly where I'm going, how long I'll be, and I check in as soon as I'm back. Because in California, in the heat, in the hills and ridges that seem so calm and beautiful, things can go wrong in a heartbeat. I lived through my nightmare once, but I'll do everything I can to make sure I never have to live through it again. I'm glad I didn't let that one day ruin hiking for me, though at the time it almost did. For a long while, every time I thought about going out on a trail, my stomach twisted. Hiking had been something I loved, something that gave me peace, but after that fall, I couldn't stop replaying it in my head. The sound of my body hitting the ground, the dirt scraping against my skin, the helpless sliding. I carried all of that around with me. For months, I couldn't separate hiking from the memory of that moment. When I finally decided to go back, it wasn't a big trip. I picked a trail closer to home, one I knew well, a simple loop that I had walked countless times before. I thought starting small would be best, but the fear was there from the very first step. My boots felt heavier than usual. Every patch of gravel looked like a trap. Every slope looked steeper than I remembered. I kept watching the ground instead of enjoying the view, scanning for roots, loose rocks, anything that might cause me to stumble. My back was tight with nerves, my legs stiff like I was walking on ice. That first time back, nothing bad happened. I finished the loop, got to my car, and sat there with my heart pounding harder than it should have after such an easy hike. But it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like surviving something small that shouldn't have been so hard. Still, I knew if I stopped there, if I let that be the last memory I built on a trail, then hiking would always be connected to fear. So I kept going back. Each time I picked trails a little longer, a little harder, until eventually I made my way back to the trail where I had fallen. Just the idea of stepping foot there made my throat tighten, but I knew I had to face it. I didn't want that slope, that single random moment, to have so much power over me. The day I returned, the weather was calm. The sky was a soft blue, and the sun was warm but not harsh. I remember the smell of pine stronger that day, probably because I was more aware of everything. I moved slower than I used to, not out of laziness but out of caution. Every sound made me tense up, the wind rattling the branches, the sudden dart of a squirrel through the brush, even the hollow echo of my boots on packed dirt. When I reached the section where I had slipped years earlier, I stopped. My heart was racing, my palms sweaty even though the air was cool. The ground looked the same as it always had, steady, solid, nothing strange about it. But in my mind, I saw myself sliding, felt the burn of skin against rock, heard the sound of my breath being knocked out of me. For a moment, I thought about turning back. No one would blame me. I had already come far enough. But I made myself step forward. Slowly, carefully, I put one foot in front of the other. Each step felt like walking across thin ice, like the ground was waiting to betray me again. I leaned forward, knees bent, body tense, ready to catch myself. Nothing gave way. My boots held steady. Step after step, I crossed the slope and made it to the other side. When I stopped and looked back, I realized how much power that patch of ground had held over me all this time, and now I had taken some of it back. Still, that hike didn't end in relief. Even though I crossed the slope without falling, I spent the rest of the trail on edge. Every sound in the woods made me jump. Every rise and fall of the ground made me expect another slip. I wasn't calm. I wasn't enjoying it the way I used to. It wasn't until I got back to the trailhead that I let myself breathe. What scared me most about the accident wasn't the pain or the blood. It was how sudden it had been. 1 second I was steady, the next I was on the ground. There was no warning, no sign, nothing to prepare me. That thought haunted me more than the injury itself. Hiking had always felt safe to me, but now I understood how quickly it could turn. Over the years, I've gone back again and again. I've hiked that trail and others in different conditions, mud, heat, even light snow. Each time, I remind myself that I can't control everything. Slips happen, accidents happen. The outdoors doesn't bend to my comfort. What I can do is stay aware, respect the trail, and prepare as best I can. But even now, after all this time, there's a trace of that day in me. When I'm hiking alone and the woods go quiet, I feel it. When I step onto a slope, no matter how gentle, my body tenses before I can stop it. I still see flashes of the fall sometimes. The blur of dirt rushing past my eyes, the sound of my shoulders slamming against rock. It never fully goes away, and yet I keep hiking. I keep going back to the trails. Because as much as fear lingers, so does the pull of the mountains, the trees, the long stretches of silence broken only by the sound of my steps. Hiking still gives me peace, even if it comes with unease now. I didn't let that one fall take it from me. The scar on my leg is faint now, but I see it every time I change clothes. My palms healed, though I still remember how raw they felt when I tried to wash them clean that day. My shoulder aches sometimes in cold weather, a dull reminder. Those marks remind me of how fragile we are out there, and how quickly things can turn. The ending of the story is simple, but it's the truth. I'm still out there. I didn't give it up. That fall taught me respect more than anything. It showed me that nature doesn't care how many times you've walked the same path. It doesn't matter how familiar a trail feels. Accidents can happen anywhere, at any time. I learned that the hard way, but instead of letting it end hiking for me, I've carried it forward as a lesson. Now, each time I set foot on a trail, I feel two things at once: the fear of what happened and the deep calm that hiking always gives me. Those two feelings walk beside me, side by side. Maybe that's how it will always be. And maybe that balance between respect for the risk and love for the trail is what keeps me going back, step after step, year after year. I still remember that day as if it happened only a few weeks ago, even though it's been close to 7 years now. I had been on that trail plenty of times before. It was one of my favorites, quiet, steady, and not too demanding, but long enough to really clear my head. The kind of place where you start off hearing every crunch of your boots and every rustle of the brush, but after an hour or so, it all blends into background noise and you feel like you're walking inside your own thoughts. That morning had started out like any other. The air was cool but not biting, and the sky was that pale kind of blue that comes before the sun really climbs. I remember my pack feeling a little heavier than normal, though it wasn't loaded with much more than water, a few snacks, and a jacket in case the wind picked up. I had no worries in my head, no sense of danger. If anything, I felt calm. I had been down that trail dozens of times, and each trip had felt predictable, steady, even safe. The trail itself wasn't particularly dangerous. It wound through a mix of forest and open sections of rocky ground, the kind of terrain that demanded you pay attention but never felt threatening. I knew every bend, every rise, every section where the dirt gave way to rock. That day I wasn't rushing. I kept my pace slow, enjoying the sound of birds scattered through the trees and the smell of pine needles crushed beneath my boots. It happened on a section I could almost walk blindfolded. There was a slight slope, nothing that had ever given me trouble before. I'd walked it in rain, in heavy heat, even once with frost on the ground, and never had a problem. But for some reason, my footing went out from under me. I didn't step on loose gravel, I didn't twist my ankle, I didn't even feel like I tripped. 1 second my weight was balanced, and the next it was as if the ground shifted in a way I couldn't stop. The fall itself wasn't long, but it was violent. My boots slid, my body pitched forward, and then the slope took me. I hit the ground on my side and started sliding, scraping across dirt and rock. I remember the sound of fabric tearing, the burn of skin against rough ground, and the strange helplessness of not being able to slow myself down. My pack caught on something, twisted me, and then I rolled. I slammed into a jut of rock with my shoulder hard enough to send a shock down my arm, and then kept tumbling until I came to a stop against a small cluster of brush lower on the slope. I laid there for a while, stunned. My lungs felt locked, my shoulder throbbed, and I could taste blood in my mouth. I don't know if I bit my tongue or smashed my lip, but the copper tang was thick. The silence after the fall was the worst part. The birds had gone quiet. The air felt still, like the woods were holding their breath. When I finally pushed myself up, the first thing I noticed was the pain shooting down my leg. My shin had caught something sharp, maybe a rock, and there was blood soaking through the fabric. It wasn't a deep wound, but it looked bad enough to make me lightheaded. My palms were raw, scraped to the point where bending my fingers stung. My shoulder felt half numb, half burning. It wasn't life-threatening, but I was shaken. And more than anything, I couldn't explain how it happened. I hadn't been careless. My boots had good tread. The ground wasn't wet. I just slipped, and for years that part stuck with me more than the fall itself. How something so normal could turn dangerous in a blink without any warning. I sat for a long time before I tried to move. When I did, I realized how stiff my leg was becoming. Every step made me grit my teeth, but I knew I had to climb back up to the trail. The slope wasn't steep enough to trap me, but it was uneven, and I had to use both hands to steady myself against dirt and rock. Each time I leaned on my scraped palms, the sting pulsed through me. Sweat soaked my back, though the air wasn't even hot. When I finally reached the trail again, I just sat down in the dirt and stared at the slope. I looked for what I'd stepped on, some loose rock, some patch of slick soil, but there was nothing. The ground looked as solid as ever, no different from the dozens of times I'd walked it before. I couldn't shake that. I still had a long way to hike out, and moving on that leg was miserable. My pace slowed to a crawl, and every little incline felt twice as steep. I rationed my water carefully, knowing the hike was going to take longer than I'd planned. Every sound in the woods put me on edge now. A snapping twig, the rustle of something moving in the brush. Normally it wouldn't have bothered me, but with my body aching and my head foggy from pain, it felt like I was vulnerable to everything around me. Hours later, when I finally reached the end of the trail and got to my car, I remember sitting behind the wheel and staring at my hands. The skin was raw, dirt ground into every scrape. My leg was stiff, my shoulder sore, but the real weight sat in my chest. The trail had always been a place of calm, of escape. That day it had turned on me for no reason, and that feeling clung to me harder than the bruises. It's been years since then, but I've gone back from time to time. I don't avoid it. If anything, I feel pulled to it, like I need to prove something to myself. Each time I hike it, I walk slower through that section, looking for what I missed. The ground is solid. The slope is gentle. Nothing stands out. But every time my boots hit that part of the trail, my heart speeds up. I feel the memory in my body before I even think of it. The slip, the rush of dirt, the helpless slide. I still don't know what caused it. Maybe my foot caught a hidden root. Maybe a small stone shifted just right. Or maybe it was just one of those moments where control vanishes without reason, where no amount of experience or confidence can save you. Now, when I hike alone, I carry that day with me like a shadow. It reminds me how quickly things can go wrong. Keeps me cautious, maybe more cautious than I need to be. But I'd rather feel that edge than forget what it taught me. The trail doesn't care how many times you've walked it. It doesn't care how familiar it feels. 1 second is all it takes, and that's something you never unlearn once it happens. 7 years later, I still go back. I stand at the top of that slope and look down, remembering the way my body slammed and twisted, the helplessness of sliding where I had always walked steady. I tell myself I'll never really know why it happened, and maybe that's the scariest part of all. Not the fall itself, but the reminder that sometimes, even on ground you trust, you can lose your footing without warning, and nothing will explain it. That trail is still beautiful, still quiet, still a place I love, but it never feels the same. Every time I walk it, there's a piece of me waiting for the ground to slip again. And that thought never leaves me, no matter how many years pass. I had always thought of hiking as something that cleared my head. It was supposed to be simple, just me, the trail, and the rhythm of moving forward. I never pictured it as something that could nearly end me. But looking back now, I realize how close I came to losing everything out there, and how a few bad steps can change everything in seconds. The day had started off with perfect weather. Clear skies, warm sun, the kind of light breeze that makes sweat evaporate just enough to keep you from overheating. I had been pushing along a ridge line, nothing too extreme, but steep enough that the views stretched for miles in every direction. The valley below looked like a sea of green waves, trees rolling out endlessly, with faint hints of distant rivers glinting when the sun hit them right. I remember thinking how lucky I was to be there, how alive the air made me feel. The trail itself was narrow, cut into the side of a steep slope. On my right, the wall rose high, roots and rocks jutting out. On my left, it fell away sharply, a long drop into brush, stone, and whatever else the mountain had hidden below. I wasn't reckless, but I wasn't paying enough attention either. My boots crunched loose gravel, and then my left foot skidded out from under me. It didn't feel real at first, the way gravity just took over. My body tilted sideways, and suddenly I was over the edge. My hand shot out for anything to grab, but there was only air. The world spun, sky, trees, dirt, and then the impacts began. My shoulder hit first, a crack that felt like my bones had burst apart inside me. My leg twisted hard under me on the next landing. The tumble seemed endless, each bounce slamming me into earth and stone, until I finally crashed at the bottom, face down, the breath torn out of me. Pain roared in waves. My left ankle throbbed sharp and deep, bent in a way ankles aren't meant to bend. My right arm was useless, dangling heavy and swollen, my shoulder burning with a sick grinding ache every time I tried to shift. My elbow ballooned so quickly I could see it through the corner of my blurred vision. I lay there, pressed into dirt, mud and pine needles sticking to my cheek, not sure if I could even move again. The air was so still that I could hear my own heartbeat pounding inside my ears. I don't know how long I stayed like that, minutes, maybe an hour. The edges of my thoughts blurred in and out. Every time I blinked, I felt like I might not open my eyes again. Then I felt the first drop of rain hit the back of my neck. The storm came fast. The sky had been clear not long before, but mountain weather changes in an instant. Heavy rain began to pour, soaking me in seconds. My clothes clung to me, cold water running down my face and into the dirt. The ground softened beneath me, turning slick, and puddles formed around my body. I shivered, my teeth clenched tight, and all I could think about was how badly I needed to move or I would never leave that slope alive. That's when I heard it, a shuffle in the brush, slow, deliberate. My skin prickled as something heavy came closer, its steps muffled in the wet leaves. I couldn't lift my head far, but I felt the warmth of breath near my legs, then near my shoulder. The smell was strong, musky, damp, the scent of an animal. Its nose touched the back of my boot, sniffing, moving toward my torso. I didn't dare breathe. My heart hammered so loud I thought it would hear it. Then it happened. I tried to push myself an inch forward, and a groan escaped me before I could stop it. The animal jolted, snorted, and burst away into the woods, branches snapping as it vanished. Relief flooded through me, but it mixed with another sharp realization. I couldn't stay here. Crawling was the only option. My right arm was out of use, so I dragged myself with my left hand, pushing with my knees, inch by inch through the mud. Each movement tore new fire through my ankle, and my shoulder throbbed with every shift. The rain plastered dirt to my skin, soaked through my pack, made every inch heavier. My palms tore open on rocks. My knees bled as they scraped over roots. I don't know how long it took. Time became meaningless. There was only move, stop, breathe, then move again. My head spun, and my body felt like it would give out completely. But something kept me crawling. Some thin line of stubbornness or instinct that refused to let me stop. Finally, through the gray curtain of rain, I saw it. A wider stretch of ground, smoother, marked in ways that wild earth isn't. A trailhead. My chest heaved with something like hope, and I dragged myself onto the packed dirt. The solidity beneath me felt almost foreign after so long fighting against mud and rock. I collapsed there, too exhausted to lift my head again. That's when I saw movement through the blur of rain. A figure, a park ranger, walking down the trail, her rain jacket gleaming under the storm. She spotted me almost instantly and rushed over. Her hands were steady as she worked, lifting my limp right arm into a sling, bracing my ankle to keep it from twisting further. She pressed a bottle of water against my lips, and the taste of it was overwhelming. Clean, cold, life itself sliding down my throat. The sound of her radio crackled through the storm. Help was coming. The minutes stretched, but soon the thrum of rotor blades filled the air. The helicopter descended, whipping the rain sideways in gusts, the roar of it shaking the trees. They lifted me from the ground, strapped and secured, my body jolted but safe. As the ranger and trail shrank below, swallowed by the trees, I knew it was over. Not the pain, not the recovery, that would be long and grueling, but the crawling, the cold, the chance of being left to die on that slope. The hospital lights, the doctors, the surgeries, they all came later. What stayed sharp was the fall, the storm, the unseen animal's breath, and the endless crawl that could have ended in silence but didn't. Looking back, it's clear to me just how close it had been. A wrong step, a broken body, a storm rolling in, and a wild animal drawn to the smell of me lying helpless. Any one of those things could have ended differently, but they didn't. I managed to move, to crawl, to hold on until someone found me. Could have been worse, much worse, but I survived. And every scar, every ache in my shoulder and ankle, is a reminder of how thin the line is between a normal hike and a fight to make it out alive.